Hello and happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for attending the Andrew Joseph PR curated webinar. Um, uh, Today, we're talking about the new urban normal post-COVID and what the city of the future is going to kind of look like. I mean, everyone is talking about what's the future of work, what's the future of retail, what's the future of trade shows. And we're going to start our conversation with multifamily dwelling and homes. And I think that's going to bring some really interesting conversations about what the cities of tomorrow, how the existing structures might change, what's going to be different. We have three experts here, Dennese Guadeloupe Rojas from Interiors by Design, Eric Clough from 212 Box, and Geoff Ross, who is a real estate executive architecture consultant in New York City. With that, I will hand it over to the panel to let them tell a little bit about yourself and start the conversation. Thank you again and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
I can start again. My name is Eric Clough. I have an architecture firm called 212 Box in New York. We just celebrated 20 years, and we think through projects holistically through different scales. So we do a lot of commercial, retail, high-end residential, but we also have products, a small film department and graphic design, where it enables us to kind of focus the architecture projects into different disciplines and think through things holistically. We love combining architecture and narratives.
Hi, my name is Dennese Guadeloupe Rojas. I'm the owner of Interiors by Design here in the DC, Maryland area. And I've been in the industry for 20 plus years in the design industry. I love what I do with a passion. I started out primarily doing residential work, which I still love doing. It fills my soul. However, I've segued a little bit into the multifamily arena where I can balance out a little bit of more of a larger scale on a project and create a little bit more luxury in the platform of what I'm doing on an everyday basis. And I'm excited about being on this panel.
Hey there, I'm Geoff Ross. I'm a real estate professional from New York City. I'm a consultant, and I do a lot of work with some of the bigger name developers in New York City, Tishman, Swig, Thor. I've done retail, I've done office, I've done resi, a few thousand units of resi in New York City, a few million square feet of office, and I'm not too sure how much retail, but a fair bit of that too. I've been doing this a long time, and before I got into the development side of things, I spent many years as an architect doing pretty much everything that an architect does. So houses, restaurants, medical facilities, ecclesiastical things. So my background is fairly wide.
Video and
so Dennese and Eric, we spoke a little bit the other day about what some of the trends might be that are going to change in the multifamily world. So do we want to sort of pick up the thread of some of the things that we were talking about the other day?
Sure. I mean, one of the things we were really, trying to get our brains around is in various industries, what will happen as people get back into the workforce in a different perspective and their living aspect. More home offices are being created. I just came back from High Point Furniture Market in October, and everything that we saw was primarily desks. It was flooded with home office furniture, lots of neat things and various ways of putting things together. But the challenge too is finding that space that you can create, that you can call your office, your home office. That I think we touched on a little bit yesterday when we gathered. But one of the other challenges is not having to clean off spaces, and you can kind of get up at when you're finished with your work day and pick back up the next day where you left off versus having to clean off spaces to start anew for the day.
Well, a lot of those are sort of luxury of space things, and in standalone houses, typically they're designed a little bit bigger. You've got a bit more space to spread out. But as we were just saying before the call started, my wife and I are typically in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York City, and if we both have to be on Zoom calls, it doesn't work. So multifamily units in large urban centers don't typically have a whole lot of space for people to spread out in. And I think there's been a trend for many years getting away from like the classic like home office or den or things like that. So it looks like a lot of that's probably starting to come back. Speaking with a few brokers, they're pushing the home office or the flex space. Are you seeing similar things as well?
I'm getting a sense that more people, I know a lot of people in our area aren't really going back into their office spaces till January. And I guess at that point it will all be, reassessed to figure out what's going to happen. But as we also discussed, part of the challenge would be to see what, corporate industry is going to be doing with people who have been working at home, if they're going to translate and downsize their office spaces to keep more individuals at home working.
Bit of a TBD on that one. I've heard a little bit of both from everybody. Everyone was going to be back to their office for Labor Day, then it was Thanksgiving, and then it's the start of the year, and that date seems to keep getting pushed back. There are definitely firms that are downsizing. I think that there are some that are thinking of a new model where people do work from home. I think that there's a danger in working from home where you don't get that sort of work-life separation. The very fact that a bunch of the tech companies were the first ones to be shouting from the rooftops that we're not going back into offices, everybody can work from home, that should have been ringing alarm bells. If the tech companies saying that, they're figuring out a way to get more people, to get more work out of more people. And I think that if you no longer have a commute and you no longer have a separation between your night and your day, I think people tend to work a lot longer hours in this situation, probably to their detriment.
Yeah.
So I would think that some of the sort of the division of spaces is actually not just a practicality of working and not being on top of your spouse or your partner, but also just as a way to sort of create a break in your day.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Eric, do you have any input to share?
Yeah, well, I was just going to mention there's kind of this idea of either dividing work and sleep spaces versus creating dual function. So like more recently, like as we picked up some new projects, in the past, we've always said to clients like, oh, this is great. You can do a dual function space here. Like, we did a lot of hidden cabinetry and, Murphy beds that are part of millwork units. And so it doubles as an office or a guest bedroom when people come over. But, we were always the ones suggesting that stuff to our clients, just because I love those dual functioning things. But now we've felt in the last, 3-4 months, people really are saying that is part of the programming aspect versus saying, okay, look, let's separate and have, I only want to do this stuff here. I only want to, work here, sleep here or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be these dual functioning things. But so I guess there are two different splits of either things are, it's kind of like functioning and programming versus, keeping up to date and constantly being able to change it. I mean,
Eric, do you think that some of that is people sort of in a search for value? Because yes, it's lovely to have the home office or the other space, but not everybody can afford the extra square footage, especially in tight markets like New York City, where you're looking at $1,000 a foot. So suddenly a home office turns into a pretty expensive proposition. So do you think that people are sort of looking for this multifunctionality as a bit of a value proposition to get the most out of their space?
Well, it's funny, I think it started, we do a lot of residential in Manhattan and the last 20 years, it's always been about the value of the space. Like our claim to fame is like we've saved every 1/8 of an inch of space, just because if we find a pocket of space in the wall when we're, gut renovating, that becomes a secret cabinet or a little bit of storage or something that unfolds, out of there, or, things that, just more programming aspects. And then lately, I think it's more just a necessity of like, value is one thing, but it's like you need to give me more spots to trick out and really then create all these different functioning things. I think, you know, it's fine. It's funny. We do a lot of tricks in millwork, and we just finished this 25-foot sort of curiosity cabinet. And I got to thinking after a discussion, it's funny how, you know, there's like a dry bar, there's storage, there's drawers within drawers, there's a fold-out desk, there's a hidden place for a ladder. We did a medicine cabinet, a tool cabinet. Like, you know, you pull open the drawer and everything is, you know, everything has a place in this massive cabinet. And I just thought it's funny how there's this need of like, I want to know what that space is for, and I want to know what I'm supposed to store there. And I, you know, like there seems to be this need for compartmentalizing everything. And maybe it's the anxiety that's kicking in on all of this stuff, but I like this idea of having a spot for everything. And then even, okay, you're supposed to sit down here and write this letter, or over here, you write this check. You do your accounting here, you do your creative writing there. So I feel like a lot of that definition helps people get through. And that's part of that luxury market of like, you know, helping people live better lives and be more organized.
It's the segmentation of the day as well. You know, the compartmentalization of this is where you do this task, this is where you do that task. Like, multifamily living is not large living. It's not like you have to get on the intercom to reach out to somebody across the unit. So,
yeah.
You know, if you're sitting here for one task and you're sitting there for another task, there should be a slightly different experience about doing the two tasks. And creating that separation, I think, helps people. I wouldn't say have a sense of normality, but have a sense of just sort of change in the day. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. I know that, you know, the market in our area, in the DC metropolitan area, it's a little, you know, it's a little different across the board. And, you know, I shared with you guys that I spoke to two architects yesterday. One of them I've known for many, many years. And I mean, we shared, you know, kind of what he's seeing. You know, Michael and I had an in-depth conversation, just talking about what we're seeing in our areas as far as people who had those one-bedroom units are more so, you know, looking to spread out a little bit more, especially if you have a partner. You want to be able to separate things. It's even hard if you have a home office and both of you are sharing that same space to have conversation going on at the same time. So,
and let's not forget, let's not forget, it's not even just home office, there's also home school. So there's sometimes two people working at home, then you've got the kids as well. So add that to the list.
Yeah, it's funny. Just we recently moved into a larger loft, and I had to take my son's room, and because we had such high ceilings, I built him a loft, but we sort of tricked it out so that all of his schoolwork is done. You know, he's got a huge desk space and filing and drawers and all this stuff down below, and then you know, everything creatively sleeping and like he's got a place to spread out and do more creative projects upstairs. We did this cool ladder that pulled out of a bookshelf and stuff. But yeah, we talked like you can separate that stuff vertically, all the programming, or horizontally. And we you know, just mentioning spreading out and thinking of residential, of horizontal living versus vertical living, and getting into the townhouse sense of privacy, you know, compartmentalizing that.
Well, different markets have sort of a different standard for multifamily. You know, New York is the standard is you have a unit on a floor, or a piece of a floor more likely. The idea that you've got a multiple floor unit just isn't something that most people have access to. But you know, once you get outside the New York market, there's a lot of options where there are things like townhouses or different scales of, it still qualifies as multifamily living, but it's much more of like a suburban space situation. So yes, you have the upstairs, downstairs.
Right, because we do have in our area where some apartments may have loft areas. I know one of the projects that I'm working on right now, it's 20 units in the building. However, the top units have loft areas. So, and it has the, you know, the whole skyline, the rooftop setting that you can also utilize. So, you know, it varies, I guess, based on where you are in the country.
Well, I want to talk about rooftops and amenity space too. So I think that's a crucial one, but sort of like the whole sort of like large, medium, small thing that we were talking about. You know, large is obviously you have extra room in your unit or townhouse or whatever to have that home office or the den or things like that. And it's a luxury that not everyone has. And the sort of the medium version is the transformative space, the not having to pack up your office every night because it's the same counter that you're making dinner on or that the kid's school is on or things like that. But you know, there's a third one too, which is assuming you've got those first two solved, it's like, how does the design of the space change in the course of the day? How does the room feel different? If you're in the same room in the morning for breakfast that you're going to be working in all day as your office, that you're going to be having dinner in the end of the night, I always think of The Shining, and all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? So, you know, what can you do with the space itself so that it has a different mood, it has a different feeling, and without having to rearrange all the furniture all the time? And I think that's a critical aspect that we'll probably see addressed more and more in units as well.
Yeah, I know that yesterday we also kind of touched a little bit of, you know, the home that had the kitchen, the desk in it, as far as being able to, because at one point people were, well, what do we do with this now that we're not really, people aren't usually sitting at them anymore? You know, I shared with you guys that I had a client who we filled it in with drawer spaces and kind of leveled it out, even, you know, way beyond the years that it was there. We try to find a way to kind of reuse it, repurpose it so that it can be, you know, taken care of. So, yeah, it's really interesting to be able to create. And you know, years ago it was a situation where everybody had, you know, a cabinet that you were able to close off, your work cabinet, and you can close it off and put everything down at night.
No, it's important for sure. I touched on amenities briefly. Sorry, Eric, you look like you're about to say something.
No. Well, you just made me think of something, and it. On the amenities when you talked about the roof garden. And I wonder if there's even a fourth level to this, which is internal. Like we've been doing a lot of kind of meditation spaces and, or just like, you know, carving out small little rooms that are pretty blank. But, you know, I was trying to think, there's a sense of, like the mind needs to be healthy and that like the curiosity that and the buzzing that sort of, you know, exists. You need rooms and spaces for your head. And that's what's so nice about those gardens, like those rooftop gardens, or, you know, we just moved a family into a large building that had a gorgeous terrace along with, you know, a rooftop garden. And it's so liberating, like, you know, that really opens stuff up. But then for those dwellings that don't have that luxury of a backyard or a rooftop, you know, even in our office, we have this like funny little phone booth where it serves almost as a meditation space too. Like we've done all this Japanese wood origami to it. And it really is a way to just, you know, shut yourself in. And then I was trying to think if that could be the
kind of get the serenity going.
Yeah, and like a fourth level of internal scale, like it's like the living of the mind, or yeah, the living of the mind, or whatever, the inhabited spaces.
Well, it speaks to all the flavors of space that we need, all the space that we are used to having external to our homes, multifamily otherwise, that we just don't necessarily have access to. Like some people would go and, you know, to meditation classes or to yoga classes or to any of these things. And in the same way that the kitchen counter is the home school and the extra bedroom is now the home office, the gym is being shoehorned in wherever it can be, and meditation spaces where probably the furthest from the kids screaming, I would expect. So yeah, you know, what people need these spaces that they just don't get anymore from being outside of the home, and the home needs to adapt. In And I think that some of that kind of comes down to the amenity space as well. So most multifamily developments have an amenity space of some kind. If it's a tower, it's a suite of rooms that have a function of some kind. If it's more of a townhouse setting, it might be sort of a village green or a common use building, things like that. These are the third spaces. You know, it's not home, it's not work, which are kind of the same nowadays. So it's the space that you can get to that isn't either one of those. In old days, in the before times, they were, you know, the screening rooms or the party rooms or the
Right.
you know, rooftop stuff like that. So I think that the amenity spaces and developments now also have to rethink about what they're going to be. You know, the need to have a 30-person screening room might not be as important anymore.
You can't really use them with, you know, with things lurking out there. So it's definitely on a cutback. I know that we spoke a little bit yesterday about some of the companies like maybe WeWork or that sort of thing, maybe, you know, getting involved and maybe partnering or something. I know it's not something that's out there, but just the notion of having something like that in your multifamily, you know, spaces.
Well, you know, for many years, there's always been sort of tucked over in the amenity space somewhere. There's a business center, and the business center is usually a leftover piece of the plan that didn't really accommodate anything else. It was too big for a closet. It was too small for a useful function. So you throw in a printer, a solid internet connection with a place people could go and work, but never did. In the end, it usually just sort of turned into be like a museum of the fax machine.
Yeah.
But I think that there's an opportunity for that to come back, and we've seen in many market segments sort of this stylization of the office, and the office can be a remote place. Yeah, the office could be on your couch in your house, or you know what, you need a break. Things are a little bit crazy, so you can go down to the amenity space, assuming that there's some sort of reservation system, and we'll trust that the cleaning program of the building is pretty solid. And there's just this extra space to go and to work, to have a conference. Maybe the acoustics are better. Maybe there's no noise in the background. Maybe you can just clear your head a little bit. So I think that spaces like that are just as important.
Yeah, I thought that, you know, having something like a Zoom room in a building would be great, where you can, you know, plug in and have that, like the booth, and you can, you know, have your meetings and do what you need to do, and then kind of carry on from there. That I think would be, you know, something to look into futuristically, because I've worked on buildings that have had, I mean, they've had everything from a massage room, you know, and go on from there. So having
Doggy spa. Yeah. But
I've
those
done a
phone
doggy
booths are
spa.
going to come back. The Zoom room, I love it.
Well, actually, there's on the Q&A part of the panel here, somebody's asking if any clients have asked for dedicated student study Zoom rooms. So it is something that's definitely on people's minds. And yes, it's you need somewhere to shove the kids, or even just to provide the kids with a bit of focus. I know several of our friends who are trying to get their kids to do their schoolwork. The kids are distracted by what their brother is doing on his schoolwork, and it's a bit of a mess. So I think that if you can create these third spaces that allow places for people to go, even if it's just to, yes, like to take a Zoom call or any of those things, but even just to, if you need to concentrate or you need to focus on something, and you can because your family's around you or on top of you, or whatever the situation is, it's an important thing.
Yeah. Even like, you know, like most people, especially if you're a small business owner, and people are doing things where you meet with people at Starbucks to have, you know, just a little meeting, you know, have that kind of a setting to see, you know, the possibilities of using that space to a different capacity, not necessarily Starbucks, but creating spaces of that nature for people to be able to utilize more frequently.
Which I think is why the outdoor spaces are even more important than ever. You know, most developments try and shoehorn in some sort of outdoor roof space in some way.
Right.
But I think we'll probably see more of a trend towards, you know, more roof space wherever possible, more sort of sequential or developed roof spaces. You know, the worst roof deck is just, it's the roof and it has chairs on it. You know, the best roof decks are the one where there's sort of like the gazebo area and a planted area and a raised area, and it creates sort of a series of outdoor rooms. I think that that's important because it allows people to feel more socially distant while still being outside. You know, if you're on a giant flat roof terrace, yeah, you might be 20 feet away from the next person, but you're always sort of like eyeing them, like, are they coming over here? Are they coming over here? And if you've got it a bit more spread out, a bit more designed, a bit more thought through, then you have your own space, or it feels like you have your own space. You know, in warmer climates, there's a lot of multifamily developments that have. I'm thinking of Miami. You always see the projects in Miami where there's, you know, the triple height floor midway up the building that's got the pool and the roof deck and the garden and the wall that opens up to the outside, and you know, it's lovely. It doesn't always work for a New York climate or even a Washington climate. So I think some consideration needs to be given in upcoming projects to how are we going to be creating interesting, functional, useful space for people that is a multi-season space as well.
So do you think as things change, do you get a sense if people are going to be more working, if we're going to have more work from home elements versus going back to the office?
Well, as someone who spends a lot of time in commercial real estate, I encourage you all to go back to your offices as soon as you possibly can. But I think what we're going to see, though, I think we're going to see a lot more flexibility. I think that a lot of companies are going to go to, you know, 3 and 2 at home at the office or things like that. Look, who knows what happens when and if a vaccine kicks in and everything returns to normal. It's not going to be soon. And the repercussions of how people work and how people choose to work is not going to change from where it is right now for a while. So I think that we should all be expecting to see more work from home. And when the world opens up a bit more, I think we might see more work from remote places. Right?
Yeah.
If you know, the Barbados offering up the 1-year visa to come work there, I think we're going to see a lot more people taking advantage of things like that. If you don't need to be in the office,
Right.
and you can travel, why are you sitting on your couch?
Yeah.
Sign me up for that Barbados.
Right?
It's so
I think
beautiful down there. We had that beautiful project for 3 years down there. It's so nice. Great island.
We'd all rather be taking Zoom calls like this from a cafe in Paris or a beach somewhere.
Yeah.
But until that happens, yeah, we're going to be, and even once it does, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff from home. I think that if anything that comes out of this, we're going to start to learn that there's a flexibility to work.
I know one of the things that we wanted to talk about a little bit was the open floor plan spaces, to try to find that, to captivate that small place for you to be able to work. I know here, it's because our layouts are a lot different. I should say our lifestyle is a little different. I don't know. I mean, I think most people are still going to that open floor plan because you kind of seem like you get a little bit more as far as you don't feel as closed in that space, but it's to find a way to divide or subdivide the space that you can create that work area in a small area of your space so that you can work and then shut things down from there. So I don't know what you're seeing, you know, on your side of town.
Well, in New York, the trend has kind of swung back and forth a couple of times. I would say that over the last 10 years, it has swung from open plan to a bit of a dabbling with more closed in spaces to sort of a little bit back to an open. It's sort of in flux. Larger, more high-end units are typically having like an enclosed dining room, and it is separate from the kitchen.
That's rare. That's only now come back, right?
It's only now come back, I'd say, in the last 3 years or so. And it starts with the high-end luxury, large units. And, you know, the ones that I've seen or talked to people on, it makes me wonder how they're actually living, because it really seems to be set up for, you know, like butler service or some sort of Downton Abbey fantasy in your penthouse in the sky. How that trickles down, though, because, I mean, often the luxury trend sets the aspirational goal that other people want. How that starts to trickle down to a smaller unit, I don't know. I mean, the practicalities of a 1,200 square foot unit with an enclosed dining spaces, there's no practicality there. The open space multifunctional plan makes a lot more sense.
It's funny within like a multi-bedroom, we've almost, like, all of our bedrooms have almost turned into these suites, and maybe not hotel suites, but like there is a coffee maker area. There's, you know, like almost kitchenettes may come back just to really have, so if guests come over, if you have, we talked about, you know, other family coming into the house and multi-generational families and homes that, you know, there is an enclave of like, you can actually, you know, do a lot of that contained in one suite or unit. But it's all connected with a living room, a rec room, or whatever. But yeah, I think the bedrooms have changed and become a little bit more generous in the new luxury kind of ideals.
Well, the greater functionality in the bedroom is probably something that we'll see. I remember when I first moved to New York and was working on residential multifamily, I was always amazed that you'd have a tiny 2-bedroom apartment that had 3.5 bathrooms in it. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Can't somebody share a bathroom? Because you're just like losing all this space. And no, it's just the New York market demands if you got a bedroom, it comes with a bathroom. And there's obviously some practicalities to it, but in some ways it seems to be just very spatially wasteful. But it does make the space a bit more self-contained. So I think that, yeah, the idea of kitchenettes, yeah, maybe like an extra sink, who knows?
It's funny, it's been a long time, but we just ended up doing a Jack and Jill bathroom recently, you know, so that they're shared, you know, between 2 suites. And that seemed rare. Like, anyway, it was a nice surprise to end back up as a program.
Was it shared as was it kids' rooms that were sharing it?
No, it was actually just 2 guest suites, but, you know, thinking like, you know, they could easily, because they're guests, they can, you know,
Right.
they don't have to spread out so much, and we don't have to give up so much real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, with the guests, would it be a full house always, or would it, you know, would they have it at different times?
What are guests?
Exactly. Oh no. We've had to rename the master bedroom, and now we have to rename the guest suites.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
It's going to be also interesting, I think, to just see what Europe is doing as well, because they're usually good at, you know, redesigning spaces, just because their living aspect is a little bit more, it's a little bit more tailored, the lines are a little cleaner. So it's going to be interesting, since they've had the same challenges that we've had, to see what they're doing. I shared yesterday when we kind of just chatted a little bit about, you know, attending trade shows and seeing some of the components of what people are doing. And I was trying to see if I can find that information for the company, that they did everything where you converted everything into something from dining to sleeping to cooking. Everything was in one big casement to translate into, you know, having that space that you get everything out of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Europe always has had, you know, there's sort of less of the high-rise experience that we're used to. You know, Europe is usually sort of a lower scale building option, an older building stock that's been converted over a couple of times. So it's almost more of like the townhouse model. In a lot of European cities, there is often sort of a courtyard in these older buildings, which is the community space. Not always converted to rooftop use, but there is some. The high-rise functionality it's a little bit more rare in Europe. You see it a lot more in the Asian countries, where the space is at a monster premium. So yes, the puzzle box room where the panel slides over and it turns into one room, turns into another room, folds up, bends down.
Yeah,
that's a thing for sure.
That's my favorite. Yeah. Paul Rudolph has a great house that the section, you know, there's just a few steps up and it's another program, but everything you can kind of see through every function. And a lot of homes in Japan are gorgeously designed that way.
But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier too, about the segmentation of the space, creating the different experience, creating the different use, so that your whole life isn't just like mashed into a great big blob of space. You've created the compartmentalization to perform specific different tasks. It almost ritualizes a little bit, but it's definitely a useful and functional thing. Hey, something we haven't spoken about, even yesterday when we were briefly discussing stuff, is any of the technology aspects of this. You know, have you guys seen anything changing in terms of, you know, mechanical systems or digital systems?
I haven't seen it. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm finding a beautiful moment of just like all these new lighting control systems are running off of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and there was a couple of places where we missed you know, uh, a switch plug, and it was like super easy just to attach something, and then the lamp was on and off, with your phone or whatever. But yeah, that's yeah, I think that has changed. Like the AV, the lighting has changed a lot for us.
Well,
Not so much mechanical, but
well, I think mechanical is always a bit forgotten, but it's definitely behind the scenes, right? So there's a huge push right now to be getting as many air changes into a space as possible, to be mixing as much fresh air from the outside as possible. I think that code in New York, at least, is I think you're supposed to be pulling in 20% fresh air on each cycle, and I think people are now trying to open up the vents to get 70 or 80%, because studies are saying that fresh air is as good as being outside in some cases, and keeping viral loads down and stuff like that. So I think we're probably going to see more about that. I think that's going to possibly show up as a marketing feature in the next year on some new developments that come up. I mean, you look at, I remember looking at some old development press from the 50s, like the selling package, and it was touting that it had in-wall medicine cabinets, hygienic. And I'm like, all right, whatever you can get your fingers on to sell the product, you will. And I think that we'll probably see a lot more mention of HEPA filters in the air systems we're going to talk about. Probably everyone's going to be, all the brokers are going to be experts on air changes per minute in the space, or what UV things are going on, or stuff like that. So I think that we'll probably see a lot more mechanical aspects that start to show up in the whole multifamily process as well.
Yeah, the especially the operable windows now. There's such great systems out there. We just did a big Renlita door that that folds up like a huge garage door, and those nano wall kind of systems that all slide open. All of that, I think you'll find a lot more. Maybe we'll have operable windows in Manhattan again. And yeah, there's some really good technology out there now. That
there's a lot. And there's also a lot of touchless technology that's coming up too. I know that every elevator company in the world is scrambling to figure out how to do touchless buttons to get you up to your apartment. It's a thing. It's a technology. It's another marketing edge. It's maybe not as important as some of the other ones, but it's definitely out there. So it's a trend that's coming up, and it expands out to touchless light systems, which Eric was talking a little bit about, like the smart systems. So there's definitely an aspect of that that's coming up as well.
Yeah, that's always interesting. I mean, as things happen, like what we're going through, the universe wakes you up to see other ways of doing things that, and you're like, well, why didn't we do this before? Because it makes so much sense now. Exactly.
What about materiality? So when we talk about briefly, like I'm seeing a bit of a trend where people are less interested in the super crazy luxury materials because there's no one to show off for. No one's coming over, right? And the desire to redecorate or to plan out a unit for the first time in a multifamily, it's about creating a sense of comfort and safety. And having gold lame walls might not be the thing to be doing that. So it seems like there's a trend towards comfort, safety versus ostentation, as well as locally sourced products. Nobody wants to be waiting on a supply chain that may or may not be happening to get something halfway across the world. Are you guys seeing anything similar to that?
I think in our area, there's lots of things going on as far as people doing things to fix their homes up on the residential side. I know that coming back from furniture market, which I attended, which was very, very different. A lot of the factories they're behind in production. I mean, some of them are working on Saturdays because they're behind, and they're only the capacity of them having a certain amount of people working at a time. They had to cut that in half. So they're working on weekends and this is the quarter where everybody wants everything yesterday because they're getting close to the holidays. So there's a lot of, I think for residential designers, there's a lot of movement having to do with, the demand for people saying, you know what, we spent so much time in this room, we've been meaning to get something done with the space.
Mm-hmm. Eric, I've seen you do a lot of like very luxurious finishes on things. Do you see that trend continuing, or is that are people looking for something
Yeah,
different?
well, part of my, I hope so. Meaning, it was like your commercial space comment, but yeah, I think, well, the home has now become, that much more important. So I think, having comfortable materials and beautiful, luxurious materials, it's not necessarily now about showing, friends and guests versus like actually just enjoying it themselves yourself. So, no, I would actually argue that all that fine detail and those elements, if you're spending more time in your home, you care more about those things. And I mean, a lot of our we create a lot of materials and bespoke products. Like we'll go into, like if it's a leather wall or something, we panelize it. We add like lots of fun little details, studying cobbler nails or staples and stuff. And yeah, I think, well, what we've also recently found is the quality on some of the products now have just been slipping a lot. Like we've had stuff come in and, either all the people who've been making things lately have like sort of were furloughed, and someone's down there in the factory floor that they shouldn't be in there, and trying to pick up the slack. But I think everything will turn back to like the master craftsman, and really, because I think this mass production of furniture and materials are really slipping. And even just in the last 6 months, I've seen what's come in. It's disappointing. So, working and collaborating with people, and one of my favorite projects we just finished was a big penthouse, and we used 50 different artisans to really create all these very bespoke materials and walls that just become artwork in themselves. So no, I think that will be a huge trend shift of, well, I mean, it's been doing that in the last 5-6 years, but really creating and making materials and the craft of making things is super, super important.
Do you see that as being scalable to like 100-unit development?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, in a sense that I don't think the repetition is necessary. Like, I would love to see a 100-unit high rise that has completely different finishes per offering. Like it doesn't, I know you can, you can customize and do a level of changes and stuff, but to really, what's the effort in, for the architect or designers to, go one step further and not do, you can have very specific, well, I guess it's more time spent in the design and the intent and the reduction of repetitive materials, I guess.
I always found it was important to bring like delight into the things that you interact with on a more detailed sort of level. So I've worked on projects where we've had like a 400-unit building. The wood floors are arriving by the truckload, by the container load, right? So customization is a little bit tricky there, but the things that we would get into would be the faucets, or the handle on the toilet, or the things that you interacted with that would have a sense of quality to them. Like the old adage, back in the day, where they put weights in a car door so that it made a good solid thunk when it closed, and it sounded like a quality car. But the same thing applies,
right,
with the details.
But within a 4-bath, 3-bedroom or something, why does every bathroom have to be the same tile and material? You know, like that's where I think a lot of things have slipped in the larger kind of commercial residential market of, you know, it's very easy to pick out another different tile. So, or take the same material and pattern it and do it in different ways.
Yeah.
Well, as people are looking for you know, more time at home, something that speaks more to their enjoyment of their space, I think perhaps that there's an opportunity for a more interactive process in that. You know, here's your base unit, here's your base finishes. For a few dollars more, we'll team you up with a designer who will customize it from the start. And it's not like as a home buyer or unit buyer, you have to find your architect, you have to find your designer. You know, the developers have an opportunity to, you know, in this time where you're going to be at home a lot more, why not customize your home? You know, call now, designers are waiting, that kind of thing. You know, there's
in my world.
It's a service.
Well, you know, I mean, we were really fortunate just to have that experience of we helped design a lobby and an amenities floor, and as they started selling, you know, penthouses and different apartments, we were there on site and we were making modifications and changes. So we were really able to customize. So that is a great model, and I think this particular developer did really well, and in the fact that it would, you know, it was this level of customization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But now more than ever, it's something that I think that people could be going on a bit more of a limb to do. There's a bit more work involved in it, but it separates your product from the crowd, because the product becomes the product specific to the person who's going in.
Yeah, and everybody wants that my stamp approval kind of a look for themselves. So they create.
They do, but now more than ever, they want their own space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
While we're still on materials, I see somebody's asked the question, what's new or current in countertops or flooring in respect to maintenance and easy to clean? It's a good question, actually, in terms of materiality. Everyone, I think most of us are past the phase where we're like wiping down our groceries when we bring them home, but there is still a question, you know, what materials and surfaces are we putting into developments these days that are easy to clean, are easy to maintain, easy to sanitize?
Well, I think everybody's still doing, you know, the quartz for the countertops. I haven't seen anything that has changed that much with things. I went to the kitchen and bath show this year, and that was still, you know, the standout product that's being used for countertops. Flooring is changing a little bit, but as far as, you know, the colors are, you have more and more that's being added to the color palette. And as far as cleaning is concerned, I think everybody's chasing Lysol and the best sanitizers out there.
Well, I would start with, like, marble's a wonderful thing, and if you don't mind all the rings that develop over time, I think everything has a story. And believe me, this is very hard for me to say, as like I'm the person who's always, you know, yelling about wiping up the marble counters and stuff. But you know, stainless steel, I think, should come back as a countertop. It was really big in early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like that's a really just a perfect kind of kitchen countertop surface. Yeah. And then also, you know, if we want that pure white, we'll often do like Corian sills on around the windows. And that always makes a difference, because especially operable windows and all the dust and stuff that comes in, or you know, the grime that builds up, being able to clean a Corian surface is just so easy and simple, and it's strong and it lasts. And I think that's always a nice luxury detail around a window.
It is a good one, because if you have a paint finish window, you are going in with the brush leaves, even if you do a good job, leaves a slight bit of texture. If you have your window open in New York City for half a day, like even 4 inches, which is all they're legally allowed to open in most cases,
Yeah.
you're going to have a layer of grime in that paintbrush texture that you're never getting out,
Yeah.
short of repainting again. So yeah, details like that, always welcome, always good. The quartz is definitely a good one for sure. I always joke that in the midst of this, I had my furniture dealers and hardware dealers calling me up to tell me about the antimicrobial powers of, you know, the copper mix in the alloy of the doorknobs and things like that. But I think that as long as you don't have like a fabric countertop and there's no carpets in the bathroom, you're probably fine.
I have another question.
Sorry, I can't see the questions, but yeah, if there are more.
Somebody put up a question, says, as a multifamily interior designer, we have been asked to come up with a unique way to show desks and a nice Zoom backdrop in every room for COVID. Sometimes a struggle to work all this into every room in a small apartment spaces. Any fun ideas for Zoom backdrops or creative ways to work bed, desk, etc. into a room? So kind of like, how can you transform the room for a Zoom call, it seems.
Yeah.
Denise, Eric, are you seeing any clever solutions that you're doing there?
Well, you know, I mean, I'll use this as an example. When the light is not raking over this, sorry, this is a 3-dimensional plaster surface, but, you know, just I would encourage people to think about lighting. And, you know, everyone loves the front face lighting and Zoom calls and stuff, but maybe you can just change your backdrops. Like if you do more of a rough surface or a 3-dimensional surface and change the lighting and do simple stuff with LED strips, you could easily change it so that, you know, you have a setting for call X versus call Y. And yeah, you get a little mood change.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that has really, especially for me, in watching television, I've seen some very interesting spaces with people doing really odd things. Oh no, Eric, I told you I liked your backdrop today.
No, sorry, I was checking if the light, I was see if I could turn the light off and then maybe you'd see the difference. But
right. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be really interesting. I mean, it may be something where you have to put a screen or something or get options for backdrops and have them be a little bit more dimensional.
Well, there's a whole website, I forget what it's called, like Rate My Room or something like that, where somebody comments on the backdrops of Zoom calls, especially like on news broadcasts where they're interviewing somebody in their house. You know, there's all the old famous ones, you know, the guy on BBC whose kid came into the room and the mom came like crawling across the floor to drag them back out again. But if you looked at the room that he was in, you know, he had books in the background and a map pinned to the wall and everything to make it look like an official workroom. So I think that the outward expression that people are going to be putting into their spaces or into their Zoom calls is going to be coming from their spaces. So they're going to be curating their backgrounds to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some interesting things. Lamps with plastic wrap on the shade still. And I'm like, okay. It's almost like, call me. I'd love to help you with your backdrop.
Exactly. Could be the next frontier in interior design. Backdrop curator.
Yeah, that's a path.
So I'm checking to see if we have any other open questions right now. I don't see any.
Let's see if I can turn this light off and see what happens.
All right.
Did it change enough?
Kind of lose some of the dimensions to the piece.
Well, we don't have the colored lights on this yet, so next step.
I see Andrew saying that we should be probably winding down soon. So why don't we do a really quick recap on some of the key points that we covered today, right? So we were talking about the in multifamily or even in housing in general, sort of the small, the medium, and the large trends or transformations or needs in space as they're affected by COVID, either INCO or POCO. And so, on the large scale, the actual space itself, like, do you have the space for the home office, the home school, without it being transformational all the time? Which is the ideal luxury that we all wish, is just more space. And sort of the medium scale, there's the transformational spaces. So, can you transform your dining table from school to dining with minimal packing things up? Is there another layer that lifts up? Is there something that folds over? Is there, the standing desk versus the sitting desk? Eric, you're talking about all these things like the clever boxes where something's hidden inside of something inside of something. So, the medium scale, the transformation of stuff. And then we're talking about like the small scale, which is just how can you design spaces so that they feel different over the course of the day, so that your office doesn't feel the same as your dining room, doesn't feel the same as your breakfast space. There's something transformative there. I think we were also talking about, third spaces in multifamily developments. There's always that space outside of the home, which is equally important, and if not more so these days, where you desperately need that space to get out of. You need to get out of so you can concentrate. You need to throw the kids into because they're being insane. Just to stretch your legs and get out, be it rooftops or the need for rooftops that create senses of social distance, or new multifunctional amenity spaces that have office space, or starting to rethink the amenity trends that don't make a whole lot of sense anymore. I think that's probably pretty important too. What am I missing here? Those are some of the big ones. What else did we go over?
New lighting components, possibilities
Mhm.
out there. Anything having to do, I want to say electronics. Not my thing, but electronics.
Mm-hmm. The convenience of the space, essentially. How can you leverage new technologies in multifamily developments that will create a sense of convenience? I mean, we all at this point need more convenience, right? You can't be chasing the kids, getting them to do school, getting to do work, getting food for yourself. All these things that were formerly outsourced, they're not. So anything that we can do to add that level of convenience is probably a pretty good thing, for sure. Do we have anything else?
No, we touched about programming and being very specific, compartmentalizing and materials. Yeah.
Andrew, you still there? Have we missed anything? You're on mute.
You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Still on mute.
Mute.
Now,
There you
now
go.
can
There you
hear?
go.
Yes.
No, thank you so much, attendees, for showing up and staying around. And thank you, panelists. I think that you did a really amazing job and you had some great questions. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thanks for having us. This is fun.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. A lot of fun.
It was so nice meeting you, Geoff and Denise.
Same here.
And you guys as well. Very good. Great conversation today.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.